Welcome to our second BCI University. We're going to go over social media policy and Facebook. Initially, this was 2 separate classes, but we have decided to be efficient. And so, if you guys can hand these out. Folks that are remote, you should have gotten a PDF of this. What I'm handing out right now is the social media policy and the sign-in sheet. Make sure you have both. You've got the SPJ Code of Ethics on one side, you have the Valentine Communication Social Media Policy on another, and you should have an acknowledgement sheet that's making its way around that I'll need to collect either at the end of class if you're able to read it during class or afterward whenever you've read and accepted the policy. You know, if you guys are like me, you'll probably kind of skim this as we're going, so I'm going to chat a little bit about some different things. So there's personal and there's work time on social media. You know, there's been a huge evolution in newsrooms about how, you know, I've been in newsrooms where you can't be on Facebook at all. Now a lot of employers require you to be on Facebook all the time. So obviously things have changed over time. One thing to remember is that guidelines are good whether you're on your personal account or your work account, just to kind of be smart overall, and we'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. We can't really control what you do on your personal time, but my overall recommendation is don't be dumb. It's, you know, pretty easy there. Other thing is to remember that nothing is private, even if you think you do a private email, private message. You know, people can always take screenshots. Snapchat disappears in 6 seconds. Yeah, right. People record it all the time. So nothing is private. Nothing is always personal.
And the internet's forever.
And the internet is forever. I'm going to give a few anecdotal things that I've seen. Does anybody know who Deuce is? No? Really? Wow. Deuce was one of the first people to blog about work. She ended up getting fired from her job. She was not in journalism. She did get fired from her job, and she was also, I believe, the first person to get fired for blogging about work. She's now a mommy blogger, and it's much less interesting than it was when she was you know, recounting the gossip of her office. But it's a good reminder that, you know, things do happen sometimes. These are 3 experiences that I've been part of. We had a sports editor who put on Facebook that he was very glad that his kid doesn't play for the school across town, the school that he covered on a regular basis. He got written up. This cops reporter, actually, he put a bunch of photos on Facebook of him with a shitload of guns. And the cut line said, "Watch out, copy desk." He was fired with police involvement. With police involvement. We had the cops come to the paper to make sure nothing happened. And then I also had a good friend of mine who had to do layoffs. We're all pretty familiar with that. And she had sent an email via Facebook to her fiance at the time, who also worked at the paper, that said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to lay off so-and-so." And she left it open on her desktop, and HR saw, and she did not. No one got laid off that day. She got fired. So just, you know, they're very anecdotal. They're not in Colorado. They're not things that we've done here, but just so you guys know, bad things do happen if you're dumb. And again, my philosophy of don't be dumb. When you're using different social media as a reporting tool, the biggest thing to remember is this SPJ Code of Ethics, which is pretty similar to ethics that you should be familiar with from different organizations if you're not an SPJ member, which is, you know, the same ethics apply online. The things that I really stress when you're using social media as a reporting tool is to be transparent. Always say who you are and where you're at. Be cautious. Verify anything, because we all know people lie on social media. And to be as accurate as you can, whether when you're posting or if you're retweeting. I forget who it was, the Penn State coach who has since died, John, but did not die the day that Twitter blew up. Was it Paterno that they said died early? There's a coach that they said died, and everybody retweeted it without verifying it. Turns out he had not passed away. He passed away about 2 or 3 days later. So, you know, even if you think it's CNN and they're perfect, you know, check it out from a few sources. I think that incident probably still would have happened.
There, just from an introduction from a couple of issues as social media has taken hold. There's I don't remember it off the top of my head, but there is a website out there that captures tweets and then edits them, and then they're retweeted. And so people put it out there. And they can go and capture a CNN tweet, and using this website, they will edit that tweet and then retweet it as if it's CNN.
Well, and And
it's insidious, it's very, very dangerous, so.
the other thing off of that, it's not just Twitter. On Facebook, when you put something up, you can put a different headline on it. You can put a different first graph on it. It auto pulls ahead in the first graph, but you can edit those. We edit those. Anybody can edit them. It can say, Michael's the coolest guy because he has a glitter beard. And the story is nothing about that. I will stop talking about the glitter beard at some point, Michael, I swear. I'm not there yet. Yeah, verify. And it's on there 3 times for a reason. Verify with at least 3 sources. It's your responsibility to manage your pages and your sites, and that includes your friends, whether they're quote-unquote Twitter, friends, Twitter followers, whatnot. But if somebody's dropping F-bombs all over your, Twitter feed with an reply to Patrick needs to go and manage that. And by manage that, I mean typically delete it or unfriend or block that person. You need to manage your comments. And then, the other thing you need to remember is that often, and I was talking to Amy and Danny about this earlier, it's like the yard sign. As journalists, we can't have a yard sign that says, go Trump. Pat, you really want that, right? That was sarcasm for those of you that missed that. But you can't do that as a journalist. It's really threatening to our integrity. It's the same when you're on social media, in particular when you're on Twitter and retweeting things. I often encourage, and I have it later in here, if you're on Twitter and you're likely to be covering something political or something touchy, to put in your information, a retweet does not equal an endorsement. And that way you can retweet stories that are topical to what you're covering without saying, this headline says Trump is the best and the second headline says Hillary is the best. You can really, just kind of cover your ass a little bit there. Make sense? All right, so you guys have our BCI social networking policy. The crux of it, again, I would say is don't be dumb. But, and I'm not going to read through it here during our coursework. Like I said, we're a little tight on time today. But please reread it, or please read it. It is different than what's in your handbook. You can see the date at the bottom. It was updated today and finalized today. The SVJ Code of Ethics was come up with a little over a year ago. Amy helped come up with that. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yes. And so, obviously, she feels very passionately about that. And I am a pretty black and white ethics person, so I am also a big ethics nerd. So make sure you read all of it, sign the paper once you've read it, and get it to me. Please do not sign the paper until you've read it. It is really important that you understand kind of where we are and what we stand for. If you have questions about either of those ethics policies after you read them, please feel free to contact me, although Amy or your direct supervisor would probably be good as well, as Danny has offered to take any questions that you have about anything. So, all right, so we're going to dive into Facebook a little bit. So this is the Durango Herald Facebook page. The little check mark next to our names, that means that we have been verified, which typically means that we end up in a few more search results. I just did that a month or 2 ago. I've not seen a big bump in what we're getting from it, but allegedly it helps, so that's good. So one thing I would encourage you guys all to do quite strongly is to go like our page if you haven't already. In fact, you should probably like the page of any brands that you work for, be it DGO, Adventure Pro, et cetera, et cetera. If you want to like other brands in the Valentine company, we have 10 or 12 of them. Please feel free to do so. Once you like the page, if you are one of the people, and you'll find this out later, that's going to be an admin on it and help post content, you'll just need to send me an email that has the email you use on Facebook. So a lot of us, I would hope, very few of us actually use our Durango Herald email on Facebook. So I just need that so I can make you an admin on the page. I'm not stalking you, I'm not checking out your Facebook page. I just need it so I can make you an admin on the site. And you'll get a little notification that says you've been made an admin. So I'll go over this. I think most of this is pretty intuitive nowadays, but why do we want to spend time on Facebook? Well, we get a lot of page views with minimal effort. Between 10 and 30 minutes a day, you can drive thousands of page views, increase the audience, increase your geographical site reach, and it helps with brand identity for both the website and the print product. A lot of people say search is dead. We talked a little bit about SEO last time, and Facebook search or Facebook feed is where it's at. That's not true yet, but it's also not too far off. You can see here, these are the number of sessions last year on DurangoHerald.com from search. And you in Cortez and Pine River, your chart is exactly the same, just with a smaller number over on the left. So search accounted for about 250,000 sessions on our website last year. All of social media combined kind of for under 150,000, or sorry, it's 1.5. My zeros are off there. 1.5 million sessions, 2.5 million sessions. So we're not there yet. It's still about half social referrals, but it is gaining every day. And we talked about this last time, but mobile Facebook, it's nearly double Facebook, and Twitter is there, but low. So what is Facebook? Like I said, we're starting every one of these kind of at a base level. So Facebook's a social networking site, and that said to be effective, we have to be social on it. That means that we interact, we respond to comments as quickly as we can when somebody asks a question. If they say, hey, what are the sirens down on 160? We say, thanks for the tip. We have a reporter on the way. We'll let you know as soon as we hear. If we have a story about it, then we say, hey, thanks. We actually were just down there. Here's what's going on. Here's a link to our story. We need to constantly respond, particularly if somebody has like circulation questions. Have them private message us their contact info, get that to Annie, and help them out. Some of you are going to be admins. I call it page editor here. As a page editor, once you've logged on, you need to read and review comments and items on the page and make sure you've responded. It's being social. If you're posting as us, and this is not for your personal account, just to clarify that, 95% of our posts should have a link back to our website. We should have art about 95% of the time, and we should have what I call chatter, and that's a little bit more colloquial, either a quote from the story that's really impactful, or a question of the audience that's somehow driven from the story, or some more kind of common stuff like you guys have been doing with the weather at night. Those of you on the copy desk, that's, hey, bundle up out there, it's cold, and then a link to the story. So, it's a different format than what we're used to. It is much more colloquial. So who is our Facebook audience, and how do they differ from those people that are going directly to DurangoHerald.com? Our Facebook audience is almost 70% female. As I told you guys earlier, or I guess that was last week. Our Herald audience is more male, so that's unusual, again, but normally it does more closely mimic the Facebook sex, but not for us. Much smaller reach. Every post on Facebook goes, well, I shouldn't say every post goes. We have 7,103 fans on Facebook, likes on Facebook, but the Durango Herald had 51,000 unique users last week alone. Now that said, the Facebook reach is different for every post. People share it, if I post it on the Durango Herald site, Amy shares it, Amy's friend shares it, that friend's cousin shares it. You can end up with 50 million users on that post alone. But overall, the Durango Herald does have more of a specific reach. Last week, actually this is 2 weeks ago now, 6,844 people engaged with our product on Facebook in some way. And by engaged, that means they liked it, they shared it, they commented. So that's a pretty big number of somebody that had some sort of reaction to our stories. The weird thing about Facebook is that there's not key peak times like you would think there are, whereas with the Durango Herald, we tend to start peaking about 6:30 till 9. We peak right before lunch, we peak right after lunch, we peak just before people go home from work. And then we have an odd little bump that John and I talked about at 8 p.m. Facebook, it's kind of all day. So you can see on this graph, the top one is Facebook users and kind of when they peak, it's all day. And as the Durango Herald down here, you can see those peak times where we get a little bit of a raise in the times I was talking about. So Facebook users are less predictable. They're on all the time, just kind of when they're bored at work and whatnot. The areas are a little bit different too, although mostly similar. Durango's #1 for both our audience on Facebook and on the website. However, on the website, LA is #2 and then Denver. And as far as Facebook, we get a #2 is from Albuquerque, which is a pretty big bump. And the ages skew quite younger on Facebook than on our printed product. Just so you can kind of see the difference there. Blue is Facebook, red is the website. And then here are the ages, age comparison. And you can see the website is much bigger on the older ages, whereas Facebook is more kind of a millennial, like the older millennials and Gen X. So we use Facebook a couple ways: drive traffic to our website, try to get engagement and user interaction. and to market our publication. And that's how we really use all social media. Drive traffic, engage with our audience, market ourselves as kind of the experts that we know we are. To drive traffic, that is pretty much the number one way we use Facebook right now. We have more than 1.2 million sessions to our website from Facebook last year. And out of those, a session is when somebody comes once, looks around, and then leaves. It's like a visit to the grocery store. So those sessions turned into 2.8 million page views. So each of those users looked at about, I think it's 2.2, 2.3 pages when they were there. So to use a grocery store analogy, it's like they went in and bought 3 products and then left. I just made that up, it's so clever. Not really. Anyway, so that's a lot of page views. Driving engagement and likes, the more people that like our page and like the posts that we post and comment on them, the more other users see them. I think you guys probably see that on your own Facebook pages. You see what your friends like, you see what your friends comment on. And the more impressions we get on Facebook, the higher our click-through rate, and the click-through rate is people that click on those posts to come to our website. We typically get more likes through sharing stories and content that we like. Stuff that is interesting tends to drive more traffic and drive more engagement than things that are less interesting. I think that's pretty intuitive. I strongly encourage you personally to share your stuff on Facebook if it's something that you really liked or are proud of. It does help drive engagement and web views, and it's also fun to kind of brag on yourself to your family and friends. For marketing, we just really want to continue to market ourselves as the expert on what we cover. We are the experts on this area. I forget if it was Amy or Doug, or it was Bill actually the other day. I was saying, we're 4 hours from any other daily, and we're further from that from papers that are as good as us. And we need to continue to emphasize that, and getting things on Facebook shares and likes and comments, they help further our audience. So we're going to go through how to post to Facebook. Again, I think a lot of you probably know this, but it is a little bit different when you're posting as a page instead of as yourself. So you post the URL in here, this top shot. It will load looking like this. So what you will actually do is take that URL out so that people can't see it, but they'll still be able to click on either the photo or the headline to get to the content. It's just a cleaner look. This photo is cutting off Kobe Bryant's head. That's a bummer. So what you would do is you would come down here and you would click on this plus sign and upload a different photo that's a little bit better of a crop. And you would click on that and unclick the first one. Now, as we were talking about earlier, good for us, bummer for some people, you can edit both this headline and this chatter. There are a couple, we don't actually have any here, kind of renegade Facebook groups that will make fake news in a lot of different towns, and they'll go in and change these, and it's kind of ridiculous. Anyway, the most important thing is if you have a headline that's maybe not going to drive the most traffic, or if this first paragraph gets kind of cut off in the middle and doesn't make sense, that's when you would want to edit those, and you literally just single click on them, and then you can edit them. This is not a Facebook page, it's a PDF, so when I clicked on it, it didn't do that. So as far as managing our Facebook page and our Twitter page, should you delete, should you not delete? If we screw something up that's inaccurate, we should delete it, but when we repost it, and you should repost it with the accurate information, you should somehow reference the fact that we had an error, and that's why it's gone. So you need to, it's just like in print, we really need to acknowledge our mistakes, try not to repeat them, try to get the information out of there if it's inaccurate as quickly as possible, but let folks know, because people did see it. And on something like TweetDeck, it'll still be in their feed. Say, hey, we messed that up, here's the right information. We do want, pardon me?
Not just edit the post, you can do that.
You can edit the post if you want. Sometimes it's so terrible that it's just better to delete it off the feed. And it's quicker as well. One thing is, if people are being offensive, they are swearing, they are making racial comments, we do want to take that off pretty rapidly. You're only as, and we have a pretty clean Facebook and Twitter audience here. You do want to remove all comments that are advertising in disguise or not so disguised. But, we do leave up comments when an advertiser tags us. For example, Scott Brewing might tag us tomorrow on the business story. Or not Scott Brewing, Scott. Yes. And so we'd leave that up. Obviously, that's linked to a story.
But remember, we can't delete the comment. All you can do is report it.
That's on our website. On our page, we can delete whatever the hell we want. it's our page. We own that. That is our page. We can take those comments off. And we should if they're offensive.
But
On
not comments on stories.
Nope. That's controlled by the user themselves. And on Facebook, you can both delete a comment and you can hide it. If you hide it, so let's say David put something terrible on our page. I can go as the admin and I can hide it, which means David can still see it, as can all of his friends. But any of our readers that are not his friends can't see it. So, I mean, that's kind of getting a little bit more personal. I always prefer the kind of more black-white approach where you just delete it or you don't. If it's something that you're going to want to hide, then you probably want to delete it. But like I said, we have a pretty good Facebook audience overall. So, you know, David and I have been talking a little bit, and we're going to stop posting quite so much to Facebook because we post pretty much everything right now, and some of it, like I was saying, is not the most interesting thing. So we've been working on a strategy about that. But you don't want to post too much or too little. If you follow any news organizations in your Facebook feeds, NPR and New York Times are notorious for overposting. They'll group those posts together, or they'll just start leaving them out of their algorithm, and you won't see them. And so there is kind of a perfect match there. You always want to have a photo. You always want to post breaking news to Facebook, and it just kind of makes for a more attractive, engaging piece. And then we also want to try to post stories at peak times. And like I said, for Facebook, it's pretty much from 6:30 till about 11:30. It's all day. I should have passed this over. Sorry. I have what I call the Facebook 10. I'll hand them out and go over them. So number one, be social. If you're on a social network and you are not being social, you shouldn't be on it. I take this akin to Seinfeld did a stand-up once about email and how it was kind of like shouting to a room, because you just want to tell people something, you don't want them to respond. We're not in the business of trying to just tell people something on social media. We want them to respond. We want to be social. We want to engage as much as we can. Link to our site every time you can. And be powerful. And I should say be authoritative. Sports guys are the best at writing with authority. Don't say, oh, just this or could this. This story says X, Y, and Z. Be authoritative in your writing when you're posting to Facebook. Because we are the authority. Don't be afraid to get a little bit more common or colloquial in your language. You want to tease to back to our content whenever you can. I say roll with it because it's not like a story. There's not an inverted pyramid. There's not all of these rules and regulations. Roll with changes, whether they're changes to things like the Facebook timeline, and this is something else that David and I've slowly started working on. We're going to start adding the history of the Herald to our Facebook timeline. The timeline is a new feature. It's not new. They rolled it out about 4 years ago now. And so you can go back to 1880 and say founded. You can put up a picture, the first picture we have of the Herald building. And so we're going to build that out and really use that to try to drive audience. Stay up to date on things that are going on with social media. Count your posts not to overwhelm or underwhelm. Always plan to use social media. It helps, and I plan to use it for your reporting and as a reporting tool, and we'll get into that in a second. And then tag people. So if we put up a story about ska brewing, we should tag ska brewing in the post. If we put up a story about Nick, we should tag Nick in the post if he allows tagging. Not everybody does allow tagging. We're going to start changing out our cover photos once a week. We're actually doing about twice a week now, and Jerry and Sean are getting those photos to me, which is good. You want to make sure that you're a good community member. Be social, but when you're representing our brand, represent the brand, and just be true to who we are, and don't get. While I encourage you getting colloquial, don't get too down and dirty, I guess. A couple weird legal issues with Facebook I just want you guys to be aware of. When you have a cover photo, you can't say, share this photo on the actual photo. You can write in the text, but you can't have it on the photo. Cover photos can't include information on purchasing, how to get the paper, et cetera, et cetera. Or it can't include a call to action like get it now. They actually have developed now a call to action button that you can create basically a virtual ad on. It's not an ad. You don't pay for it. Less than 20% of a cover photo can be text. Selling space on our Facebook page is prohibited. And But as long as we can comply with all of their other rules in terms of service, we can use our page to advertise our products and services. So they can get really finicky about that. Couple other things. You can't, this is bizarre. I've seen them crack down on this before. You can say like the Herald on Facebook without any sort of logos of ours or combining our logo with theirs, but you can't say like the Durango Herald Facebook. It's bizarre, but it is a legal thing. And you're not supposed to use Facebook as a verb. So you're not supposed to be able to say like Facebook us.
What?
That I've never seen them crack down on, but it is in their legal rules. It's pretty interesting. Just a couple of things so you guys know about photos. Using a candid photo as a news organization that you've pulled from Facebook is actually okay, as long as it's for a non-commercial editorial use. We don't like to do that very often, but if you are in a pinch, good to know. If you post something to Facebook that's a photo, make sure that we do have permission to use it, because we are, per their terms of service, allowing them to reproduce that photo through shares or other people downloading it, etc. It's just part of their terms of service, and if you're on the provider, you agree to that. When we delete a content, though, we do terminate that license. However, if I put up a photo that had a story that had a photo that Michael took, and Michael calls and says, Claudia, I didn't give you permission to use that photo, and I say, oh my God, I'll go delete it from Facebook, but Megan shared it, kind of screwed the pooch. Megan shared it, it's out there. So, while we do terminate that license, it can't be kind of grandfathered in. So right now we publish everything about 45 minutes. We're going to slow that down a little bit since we're not going to be putting all content up there. And so just a couple things on who's going to do what moving forward. Like I said, photos doing the cover photo. David is obviously still going to be the man for all social media. But on nights and weekends, we are going to try to make it so that David doesn't have to do everything. And this will probably start next week or maybe even later, depending on when Mark's coming back. But at night, Mark will designate a person, and David will communicate with that person for where he's got posts through and what's on and what's not. And on the weekends, the editor will designate somebody, probably a reporter, to do that. But that is still a little bit in production. So you guys don't have to go send me your Facebook email addresses until you know that you'll be an admin at some point. And I'll follow up with you. So next week, we're doing Twitter 140. And so if you are on Twitter and you use lists, I want you to email me the lists that you use most often. And we're going to start delving into Twitter a little bit there. That is a lot of information, and we are right at half an hour. Does anybody have questions? No? All right. By the end of the week, I do need your signed acknowledgement of the social media policy. That is for HR, just so you know. And we'll see you guys next week.